June 3rd, 2025. Lovely morning. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda? Moved by Jordan, second by White. Any additions or deletions from the agenda? Council. Sure.
I just add something about property maintenance and zoning.
I canceled my appointment. I have a migraine.
Really? Any else? Council Pickard, I'm gonna have to remember to look at here, so, Council Pickard is here virtually, so. Anything else? Seeing none, all those in favor as amended? Opposed? That's carried. Any declaration of continuing interest in the general nature thereof? Council, your.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Report CL 35/2025 talks about the wind energy program. I am neither in support or opposed to wind energy as a concept at this point in time. I can make arguments either way. But it should be known by council that my farm is one of the ones that are contracted to receive a turbine should the Cedar Flats project go ahead. And as such, I think it's important that I step away from any further discussions on wind energy within the township until such time as decision has been made, at least on the Cedar Flats project, but potentially others as well.
Good. You got a form for the declaration?
There is.
Do you have the form?
I'll get it.
You have the form? No, okay, we'll make sure you get one before you leave today. And you can fill out and sign. Okay. Any other questions and answers? Seeing none, moving on then to minutes of the May 20th meeting. Moved by Gibbons, seconded by Wade. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councilor Pickard, can you hear us? We can't hear you. You're muted.
Yes, I can hear you fine, thank you.
Okay, just want to be sure, should have asked earlier. So, business arising to the May 20th meeting, Julie, anything you want to add?
I don't have anything to add unless there's any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, do we have a mover? Moved by Gillis, second by Thurston. Result, council, after receiving report CL 34/2025, business arising from minutes of the May 20th, 2025 as information. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. First appointment is Connor Brennan. Connor, you're here for asset management, and you're going to go through a bit of a presentation for us. So
yes, I am. For the mayor, thank you for having me, council. So yeah, my name's Connor Brennan, asset management specialist with Oxford County. As I presented last year, 2024 asset management plan, we have a shared service agreement that's helping out with the asset management capital planning. And so today we're going over some scenarios, the proposed level of service, and then you have 2 full weeks until I come back in the next council meeting to review everything. And today is mostly just trying to show how we put the scenarios together and how we went through the review with staff. So overview, we're just gonna go over the area regulation 588-17 that lays out all the requirements. We're gonna go over how we prepared the scenarios, a summary of the whole township's position, and then the next steps. Go down to. So OREG 588-17 is due July 1st, 2025. The proposed levels of service is the main addition that we had to include for this asset management plan. This included the explanation of what proposed level of service for each service area we included. Proposed performance, which is table 3.1.2 of each of the 6 appendices. And the life cycle management and financial strategies for each of those sections. Today, we're going to go over 3 of the appendices and scenarios. We're gonna go over roads, bridges and structural culverts. And facilities, which is the administration and transportation buildings, along with some of the smaller cemetery buildings. The other ones, so fire department, parks and recreation, the transportation other, which is mainly streetlights and sidewalks, and fleet equipment. We'll touch on for the next meeting. If you can just go back up, sorry. Yeah, the annual update is also a main part of this, that each year we have to include an update to council about how we're doing and what we've previously chosen, if there are any changes, so that would be a ongoing commitment for council each year, probably part of the budget process. So, yeah, sorry, we can go down to scenarios. So for the 3 scenarios we're reviewing, again, this is roads, bridges, culverts, and facilities. We went over the same structure for each, and we reviewed this for staff for each area. So the 2025 budget reserve contributions or average annual costs, for instance, roads fluctuate so much year to year that we used an average of either 5 to 7 years, I forget, from 2022 forward, to get a good idea about what road costs are as well as bridges. And then for facilities, we did something similar for average annual cost for capital contributions. Each of the scenarios also have a fully funded scenario where we looked at with no budget limits, what would the amount of money we would need to put in for roads to be as good as condition as they could be. And then we did 2 other options, either based on funding or a specific condition target. So for instance, if we want all the roads to be at 65 pavement condition index, this is how much money we need to put in. 2024 asset management plan last year was based on the fully funded scenario only, because we didn't have the software to be able to come up with the different scenarios. And most asset appendices are up to 100 years, roads is up to 50 years, as we'll get into. That's to capture life cycle needs of assets with long life. We recommend life cycle projects based on funding, and deferred based on risk when there's insufficient funding. And some of the system limitations, we're working with the software provider on enhancements and bug fixes, and recommendations are based on the capabilities of the system at this point, or at this point in time, but we're continually working to improve that. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So each of these 3, we're gonna go through roads, then bridges and facilities. If you have any questions, we can talk about them for each area. Any questions to this point? All right, so yeah, same structure for each of them. So we conducted each of these in 2 stages. As we talked about, this roads is based on pavement condition index target. All other assets are based on percentage of fully funded scenario. And this was reviewed over 50 years. Because many rural road replacements are forecasted in the 50 to 100-year range. And we're still investigating the needs and costs of complete rural road replacements. I think in most cases, we don't need to completely replace the road base, but in some cases, especially when there's heavy equipment in the area. Somebody was just talking about stubbies before this, and concrete trucks up and down there, and maybe some gravel roads that would complete rural road replacements, but that's not. Most of those replacements are after the 50-year mark. So to this point, the graph there that shows fairly even distribution between the highs and lows in terms of condition. Those are the 50-year mark. After that point, once we get into rural road replacements, we just have to figure out how we're going to build that into the system. So that's a future improvement. Yeah, current recommendations are conservative in nature, and their including may drive the annual needs higher. However, as this does not impact the funding strategy for even the first 20 or 30 years, you see the lines are more or less even with where our current road funding is. There isn't much change that needs to occur for the next 10 years. go out to the next slide as well, thank you. So, scenario A was based on the 5 to 7 year average. At 1.629 million a year, that led to fair condition. And 21% of assets in poor critical condition. Scenario B was the fully funded scenario that would take us to $1.9 million a year. And scenario C, which is the one that staff had chosen in our review, was 1.69 million a year. So that would be an increase to 65 pavement condition index average for roads over the course of the 50 years. And so that would be an increase in average condition to good of most road or of the average road, and 18% in poor critical condition. And the recommendation for the budget survey was 95% of respondents indicated that the service levels related to township roads should be maintained or enhanced. I think that wouldn't be surprising to most. If we can go on to the next slide, thank you. For planned investment levels, we used inflation throughout, and the recommended increase from 1.644 or sorry, 1.629 to 1.693. It's an average of $12,000 increases for the next 10 years. Oh yeah, so this appendices, we just went over all the roads costs. This also, when you're reviewing it, it also includes the transportation other, which we included sidewalks and streetlights. So both those have significant needs forecasts over the next 10 years, or sorry, primarily in the streetlights portion. So the table shown here in all financial strategy for this appendix, the transportation appendix, includes both sidewalks, streetlights, and roads. So that's why the $12,000 figure, of which only $6,400 increase each year for roads is part of it. And roads increases are only being proposed until 2031 as well. So in total, these increases will account for 0.2% levy increase for roads each year. Any questions? Yeah.
Just make sure I understood that right. The road increase includes, the 12,000 includes transportation other.
Yeah, so this appendix is both roads and transportation and other.
So it's
Yes, the
all in
12,000
there, it's not-
increases
okay.
all for us, yeah.
When I first read it, I thought it was just roads and.
Yeah.
That's fine. Good, thank you. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. You just made the statement that there's only increases in levy for the next 10 years for roads and.
That'd be getting up to the proposed funding level to get the 65 pavement condition index for the next 50 years.
So then in your last graph that we just talked about on page 9 of the report, does show steady increases beyond that point. Is that just inflationary then?
Yes, that would just be inflation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Might as well move ahead.
Okay. So same process for bridges and structural culverts. Again, this was conducted over a 100-year period for this. Many of the bridge replacements are forecasted in similar decades. So 2060s has a lot of bridge replacements and structural culverts, 2090s. And this was also based on the bridge condition index. Of course, we get the every 2 years, we're mandated to have the Ontario Structure Inspection Manual inspections done. And so we have very accurate conditions for our bridges done on a every 2-year basis. And similar to roads, again, these are current recommendations. They are conservative, and again, there aren't significant differences over the next 10 years between the 4 scenarios that we looked at. Well, if we go to the next slide. So 2025 budget contributions. Between the amount put in the reserve and the money from the Canada Community Building Fund and the Ontario Community Infrastructure Funds, CCBF and OSIF, we were at $440,000. This is a slightly higher amount than the amount which was fully funded, which was $439,000 in scenario B. And scenarios C and D are lower than that amount. 378,000 was the 70 pavement condition index that we had set aside. This is average. We're including OSIF and CCBF funding. We're including them at the current level, whether they go up or down. But it's also assuming that we are putting 50% of that towards bridge projects. It may not happen every year. And so that is how we had put the scenario together. We had chosen scenario D because it did maintain the average bridge condition index at 70, which is high number. And as projects will be prioritized based on risk, staff feel this proposed service level and funding approach will not result in any structures posing a health and safety risk to the community. For bridges, we have one more slide involved. So again, similar to the last, estimated inflationary rates are used, and the allocation of grant funding is proposed to remain the same over the period, as I just talked about, CCBF and OSIF. And aside from the inflationary increase, staff are not proposing any further increases to the contribution level for 2026 budget, which would include the current $200,000 of what's set aside for the reserve in 2025. Although showing is overfunded in near term, the additional funds will allow the reserve balance to increase, which would help mitigate risk towards unplanned needs. Staff will continue to monitor actual rates of inflation to determine if the changes to the level of service or funding strategy should be considered in response to changing economic conditions.
Any questions on bridges? Councilor Yurman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're not terribly exposed to the township two bridges per se. We don't have a lot of waterways that we have to cross. But it seems to me that nearly 30% of our structures being in poor or critical condition is a rather alarming number. Can that be attributed to, since we have a low number of bridges, that can be attributed to one or two that are in very poor shape that are not in use?
Yeah, it's based on replacement costs, and yes, it's because of that.
Okay, and then second question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'm gonna go into the weeds here a little bit because I was going through the extended report. So next link down on your file. And in bridges and culverts, it shows total replacement costs of nearly 24 million. And expected life on all those various projects nearing the end of the expected life of these different projects. So how is it that we can go through this report that you just stated where there's no increase in funding required or planned, and yet we're at the end of a 50 or 60-year cycle on the majority of our infrastructure, and looking at $24 million worth of replacement costs?
Yeah, so yeah, it's just weighted by replacement costs, some of the bridges, so the Domtar Line Bridge, which I don't think a council decision has been made about, but that is 2029 replacements, and that is going to be a significant replacement figure. That is part of it. I think partly that may have to come from the venture because it's outside of the system for the amounts we put in here. As for the rest of that, I might have to look further into that, but this was what the system had said that we should be putting money towards. So.
Area of concern for sure, Mr. Mayor.
So, we have to remember here, we're suggesting 400,000 a year being put into reserve, and for 24 million, which is 60 years. Straight line, not doing interest on money, go ahead.
But, and fair comment, but in response to that, the report shows that we're nearing the end of life on the majority of those pieces of infrastructure. Like we're at year 52 and 55 of a 60-year plan. So in very short order, inside of the next 10 years, we're looking at full replacement of almost everything.
I don't think almost everything, but I will have a more complete answer for council for next in 2 weeks, but yes, I think a lot of the major structural replacements, certainly the biggest being the Domtar line would be coming up relatively soon, but then a lot of the other replacements are rehabilitations, which are included in the model.
Thank you.
Just a little curious on the source of funding primarily here, or at least 50% of it is from the Ontario Canadian Building Funds. I'm not gonna remember the correct names, but you know what I'm talking about. So I'm just wondering, how sure are we that that's gonna be there for the long term? Because I would suggest maybe the Ontario and federal governments don't have a whole lot of money.
We built that into the model that we're expecting it currently. If that money doesn't go towards municipalities, I think we would be in a lot worse shape than Southwest Oxford. But we're building that, we're expecting that money to be coming in for these replacements to take place, because you are right, it's more than 50% of that current budget right now, set aside 200,000. In 2025, we're expecting that to increase, but $240,000 of the model here is the OSIF and CCBF, so provincial and federal government.
So I just raised that because I think council needs to remember that without that funding, this is a very different story. So every 4% increase or 3% increase in the tax, if that might disappear, so.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Let's wander on then, please. Connor?
Absolutely. So the last scenario we're going through today is the facilities, which again is the administration building and right now, transportation building across the lot there, and some of the smaller cemeteries and buildings therein. So this, unlike the last year, this is based on percentage of fully funded scenario. This is reviewed over 100 years. At the last council meeting, it's my understanding that the engineer was here to talk about the replacement of this building. This building in the system is based on the building condition assessments that we had done in 2023. It was replacement was to occur in 2046. That's the end of life of the building. It is being replaced in the system at $2 million, which is like for like building this building again. But any additional expense, which I understand was part of the council meeting 2 weeks ago, would be probably debenture funded. More significant impacts, cost of mitigation, the event of asset failure would obviously affect this. And in general, the improvement areas, including finding components and life cycle strategies. The big spike there in the 2107 is the transportation replacements, which would also likely require debenture funding unless in the fully funded scenario. Another area of note, so the working capital reserve is currently $2 million funded. But roughly $1 million of that would likely need to stay in the reserve, just due to the reserve policy. For the next slide. So the $24,000 for scenario web A was just based on previous average over previous years of capital investments. the $176,000 would be the fully funded scenario to replace this building like for like, as well as the transportation building and in the next, 80 years or so. Then we had chosen 50% funded and 60% funded as the next levels. We had chosen scenario C, which was 50% funded. To achieve 50% funding of this portfolio. And go on to the next slide. So you can see on the unfunded requirements of this that we're getting majority of the way towards funding the 50% proposed level of service we've identified. An increase to the contribution to the roads building reserve, approximately $4,500 is proposed over the 10-year period, accounting for 0.1% of the 2025 levy. The new sand dome also comes in 2033, which is identified in the DC study, the development charges study done in 2023. This would add another $2,500 increases each year. Once that has been paid for by development charges, staff will continue to monitor inflation rates and determine if any changes are needed. But the key thing to remember here is that we are identifying a like for like replacement of this building in 2046. Obviously, that time frame probably would be moved up significantly, and the additional increases would probably be venture funded. Any questions on this one?
Whatever, Councilor.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, back to the main report again, under facilities, transportation, the building count went from 6 in our previous report to 49 this time. Was there a difference in how those were counted or accounted for?
Yeah, that would be a difference in how it was accounted for. I just must not have caught that, but were there any differences in the actual buildings? No, I think that was just the components that were used last time. This time I just didn't catch that, so I will address that for forward.
It just caught me off guard because I didn't think we'd added, 43 new buildings anywhere. Not that I was aware of.
You were correct on that.
Other questions on this? So the $9,000 increase you talked about in the scenario brings us up to the 50% level, but it's 9,000 plus inflation over the next 10 years. You gotta make up that 90,000 shortfall.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Want to make sure I understood that. Okay.
So next slide is about the natural assets. That was the other major increase for this. We can go into this more in the next meeting. I just kind of wanted to touch on briefly what we did. So through our GIS team, we went through all of the aquatic as well as terrestrial natural assets. This is a map of the township owned lands and kind of what natural assets are included on each land. Didn't plan to have a major discussion on this today, but if anyone has any questions about how it was put together, but I was gonna have more detail for the next meeting for the natural assets. But essentially, we've gone through a land review with all staff and kind of how the natural assets benefits the township. With that report, the next steps were based on replacement costs and some of the other steps of the Ontario regulation that all municipalities are more or less in the same boat on figuring out how these natural assets give us how to evaluate them. So I think for the summary. Yeah, basically the annual funding requirements, we're looking at long-term financial sustainability, and we are going to be reviewing this within each budget cycle, and make sure that these assumptions or the analysis that we've done here as we're doing it for each budget. We identify and counsel any changes that have happened and make sure if we're deferring any projects with their long-term strategies to end up paying for them. And we've included reserves throughout, but note there that they're also utilized to fund emergency or unplanned expenses. We don't want to drain them if at all possible. Go on to the following slide. Thank you. So this was just the overall replacement value for all 6 appendices that we're going to be going over. The annual investment target, and the far right column is average, or sorry, annual investment surplus or deficit. So overall, we're looking at a $26,000 annual deficit that we are trying to make up over the next 10 years. And another note, so this does not currently include stormwater, so transportation services did mention stormwater replacement costs, but we don't have it in the financial strategy. Council has brought in a user storm fee for the settlement areas, that are areas, villages. And so to include that in the MP, we're going to include it in the 2026 update to council. Just to make sure the user fees are fully incorporated into the model. And overall, the most significant driver here is the transportation services area, mostly due to roads. And then the following slide is just for the next 5 years, the percentage levy increase based on the 2025 budget that's proposed here for the asset management plan. Any questions?
Any questions from council on this? Councilor Gibbon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity then on that last slide, the levy increase that's proposed over the next 5 years, that would be exclusive of inflation, so the inflation would have to be added to that as well.
That includes inflation.
That includes inflation. Okay, thank you.
Good, any other questions? Any questions or comments from you?
Yeah.
Not yet, okay. All right, so anything further than Connor, you want?
Nope, as you review over the next 2 weeks, certainly send comments or questions you have, and certainly I'll address them, including yours, Councilor Yema, for the next meeting. And we only went through part of the 3. We didn't include transportation other, obviously I discussed it, but fire department, recreation and fleet and equipment. Any questions about those or any further detail as we go through the scenarios and the AMP, just let me know, and certainly have it addressed for the next meeting.
Okay. A couple quick comments, and one under the natural resources and asset management. This was, I wonder how we would establish a replacement cost. But historically, what we've done mostly in natural resources is that we just let them alone. Sure. And let them actually naturally resource themselves. So that hasn't been, in my mind, a hot issue or a subject that we spent a whole lot of time. Around stormwater management, as we pointed out at the last meeting, we actually approved the plan so that theoretically the asset management of that infrastructure should cover itself.
Yes.
For the more urban areas of the township, and the Drainage Act actually covers the problem for the rural areas. So, but overall, actually, I'm quite pleased. I look at it and a lot of credit to the staff for making sure that we historically have put money aside for the long term, and that we try to keep. I think this very good at trying to keep stuff up to date and, relatively in good shape. And, we have a less than a 1%, deviation between kind of the target that we set. You set the target that we set and where we are, I think that's pretty good. You're going to about the 20 places in Ontario that are nowhere close to that. And, so I feel pretty comfortable with that. I look forward to, seeing you at the next meeting. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, any further questions from Connor before you go? Councilor York?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under the facility scenarios, we're talking about a $9,000 increase in investment over the next 10 years. What impact, one of our reports further down the agenda is going to talk again about the new municipal building. What impact does that have on that $9,000 figure?
That would increase the amount of money we would have to the reserves to put towards that new building. It wouldn't increase all the way to the $6 million range, whatever it is for the new building. But it would just increase for reserves to be able to put to that, because working capital reserve, we have to keep roughly $1 million there based on reserve policy. We would only have, somewhere around $1 million to put towards it right now, and so that would just be putting more money away for the replacement of that building.
Thank you.
So it would have a significant impact. Because you don't only have to pay for the building, but you have to pay for the replacement. And, or theoretically, that's what the bond wants us to be able to do, so that we don't have to go rent it.
Well, once we paid for it, we start putting money towards the replacement, yes.
So I think, would have a large impact, and $9,000 is nowhere close. But it's based on what we have today, and the assets we have to replace at this moment with this building, so. But, it's gonna have a big impact. Okay, any other questions? Seeing none. Thanks very much. I guess we have a motion somewhere to receive this information. Moved by Way, second by Thurston, that council received their presentation of information. Anything else, Connor, before you go?
No, thank you very much for having me.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's great. Thanks very much. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank
you. Okay, now it's slightly past 9:30, so we'll move right into the, first of the planning report. And we need to move to the public meeting, right? So moved by, Thurston, second by Hitman, to move the planning, or public meeting for the planning report, agenda 4/25/01. Township surplus property and accessory structures. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And, just for the public to know, Laurel will present the report. Council has an opportunity to ask any questions on the report, for clarification, and then anyone in the public, speak, either in favor or opposed to the report, and then council deliberate and make a decision. So, this is a report on accessory structures, so please, Laurel, take us away.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Mayor Mayberry, members of council, staff, and members of the audience. I'm here to present the proposal to amend the zoning bylaw to do two things. To facilitate an increase to the maximum permitted lot coverage for accessory structures throughout the township. And the second is to remove the provisions relating to the minimum dwelling size to support and facilitate the development of smaller and more affordable homes to support broader housing affordability goals. What I'll do is just summarize some of the key points in the report and then provide more detail if there are any questions. So with respect to the lot coverage for accessory structures, township staff initiated this application mainly to align the provisions for accessory structures with the current request we're receiving in an attempt to streamline the process and reduce the number of minor variances that we receive regarding maximum lot coverage. When I did my research to see what had occurred between 2019 and basically mid-May, 22 applications had been submitted from 2019 to mid-May requesting increased lot coverage for accessory structures. 18 were minor variances and 4 were zone changes. In the report, table 1 summarizes the breakdown of the types of applications during this time frame. So in residential zones within a settlement area, there were 12 applications, which is about 54.5% of all applications. The requests range from proposed increase from 97 square meters to 149 square meters, so about 1,044 square feet to 1,609 square feet. 9 of the applications, or 41%, were received relating to residential zones outside of a settlement area. The average proposed increase was 231 square meters, or about 2,488 square feet. There were 4 zone changes also in this category. 3 were required due to rezoning as a condition of consent. So basically, there were existing accessory structures on the agricultural property, and that required a variance to recognize the square footage of those properties. In agricultural zones, there was 1 application. The requested increase was for 297 square meters, or 3,200 square feet. Staff did not interpret this to be minor, and it was not supported by staff or council. So the township's proposed amendment is to align the provisions for maximum lot coverage for accessory structures with those of East Zora Tavistock, which provide for the greatest lot coverage of all of the rural townships in the property. With respect to minimum dwelling size, the township proposal is to remove the provisions for minimum dwelling size in all zones where a residential dwelling is a permitted use. This is to facilitate the development of smaller and more affordable homes to support housing affordability. This was discussed with the township's housing committee. So as with all planning applications, this was circulated to a number of agencies and departments. The comments received are summarized in the report. A quick overview says Western Public Health supports removing minimum dwelling sizes to support housing affordability. With respect to the increasing the provisions for maximum gross floor area for accessory buildings, Township Building Services noted that construction materials and standards do vary depending on the size and use of an accessory structure, and suggested that we should amend provisions for side yard and rear yard setbacks to reflect the scenarios that may require greater setbacks. So incorporate those into the bylaw rather than people finding out at the time they go to obtain their building permit. Township Septic Services noted that increasing accessory structures could have an impact on the design and location of private sewage disposal, and noted that as long as the requirements for this disposal, as set out by the Ontario Building Code, are being met, they do not have any specific concerns. But I did want to mention their comment. In terms of comments from the public, I did not receive any phone calls or emails or concerns from the public at all. So when I looked at these requests, as I said, I did an analysis of the applications that had been received from 2019 until mid-May of this year. And the intent of maximum provisions for lot coverage is to ensure that these structures do remain secondary to the principal dwelling, and that there are minimum impacts to neighborhood properties. So things like privacy are maintained. We want to make sure that privacy is maintained and other issues. We also want to maintain sufficient space to accommodate private services, grading, drainage, access, and amenity space. So these are all the things that we evaluate when we look at requests to increase maximum lot coverage for accessory structures. I included an analysis of the 22 applications between 2019 and mid-May. The Township Committee of Adjustment did approve all 18 minor variances and approved 3 out of 4 of the zone changes. Most of the minor variances, 15, were for new structures and 3 were for additions to existing buildings. With respect to residential lots within settlements, the township's proposal, as I mentioned, was to increase the maximum lot coverage to 100 square meters, or 1,076 square feet. I found that the data did support that recommended increase, and I'm of the opinion that this does align more closely with the applications that have been received since 2019, and no concerns were identified with this. With respect to residential lots outside of settlements, through the research, I found that the average of the minor variances was 231 square meters, or about 24 and 88 square feet. And staff are of the opinion that instead of recommending the township proposal of 280 square meters, an appropriate and reasonable increase to the maximum would be to reflect this average. The data doesn't really support going to the maximum recommended by the township. So staff are of the opinion that a revision of a maximum of 225 square meters or 21 square feet is reasonable. That is supported by the data. For the agriculturally zoned properties, as I mentioned, there's only one application between 2019 and May 2025. And as with the properties, the residential lots outside of settlements, I'm of the opinion that one application doesn't provide sufficient justification to increase the maximum to what the township was recommending. And I think it would be reasonable to align the new provision with a recommended provision for the residential lots outside of settlement areas. And that would provide some consistency with the lots in the more rural areas. I have discussed this with township staff and they are supportive of these revised increase provisions. So the recommended maximum lot coverage is summarized in table 4 in the report. So for residential lots within settlements, the recommendation is 100 meters squared or 1,076 square feet. For residential lots outside of settlements, 225 square meters or 2421 square feet. And for agricultural zones, also 225 square meters or 2421 square feet. And again, these are for residential accessory buildings. These are not for agricultural structures, just to make that note. With respect to minimum dwelling size, it's currently required, a minimum dwelling size is currently required in 10 zones in the township's zoning bylaw, ranging from 46 square meters or 495 square feet to 93 square meters or 1,001 square feet. So that's the minimum dwelling size required. To facilitate the development of smaller and more affordable dwellings within the township to support housing affordability, the township has proposed removing these provisions. So there would be no requirement for a minimum dwelling size. This would align the township's provisions with the Ontario Building Code. The Ontario Building Code does not specify a minimum size for dwellings, but it does include certain minimum requirements and standards related to health and safety and related to functionality of the design of a residential building. So although it does not require minimum dwelling size, it does have minimum standards required for dwellings. So this amendment is supported by the official plan, which establishes that all forms and opportunities of housing required to meet the social, health, and well-being of current and future residents will be permitted and facilitated. Again, this was discussed with township staff and with the housing committee who are in support of this recommendation. In conclusion, it's the opinion of planning staff that the proposed changes to the bylaw regarding removing minimum dwelling size and increasing the maximum permitted lot coverage for residential accessory structures, as described in the report, are consistent with the complete community and housing policies of the provincial planning statement and maintain the intent and purpose of the official plan, respecting providing opportunities to develop all forms of housing, including affordable housing, and with the objectives regarding residential designations with settlement areas. I'm very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Laura. Questions from council? So, go ahead, Councilor Lewis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the planner. So we talked about setbacks from the accessory buildings. So that will be changed based on the size of the building that's applied for, or?
So, Brad, the chief building official, is here as well, and he can help me answer these questions. So, with respect to these comments, planning staff are of the opinion that the provisions of the Ontario Building Code respecting these would supersede the minimum required interior and rear setbacks. So because the requirement for setbacks are dependent on so many factors, including building size, construction materials, openings, proximity to services, et cetera, we feel that the Ontario Building Code is the suitable legislation. It would be very challenging to incorporate this into the zoning bylaw. Applicants may need to amend their proposals to comply with the requirements of the OBC, the Ontario Building Code, regardless. And planning staff feels that the Ontario Building Code is the most appropriate place for this legislation, so through education and communication. We believe that this is just the most effective way to manage it.
So I think that's the right approach. I think people are allowed to have bigger buildings. They should expect that obviously the standards are gonna be different than they were in the past. As long as they're educated on that, I think.
Other questions from council? So in all cases, 10% of the gross area will be the maximum lot coverage by accessory buildings. There's 10% there plus the coverage of the residential unit itself.
Very, can you just repeat that?
So it's 10% for accessory building.
Correct.
So if I have 1,000 square foot lot, that means I could have 100 square feet for my accessory building. I realize I'm exaggerating for a fact, but and then I could have 500 square feet for my house. Or is it cumulative effect of the accessory or of the lot coverage in fact?
The provision for the accessory structures is 10% of the lot area or the maximum that I'm proposing.
So
Correct.
I guess what I was kind of working, I was thinking about, if you had a lot in Mount Elga that we allowed 45% coverage for the house. And then we're adding another 10% coverage for the, if the lot was big enough, for the accessory building, so 55% coverage.
Through you, Mayor Mayberry, that is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I
Yes.
understood that correct.
Yes,
So,
and
okay,
through you, Mayor Mayberry, this is pre-2019, the standard was actually, the provision was actually 100 square meters for residential lots. In 2019, it was reduced to the current standard. So this, in effect, is returning to the previous standard because the data has illustrated that these requests continue to come in and they've all been approved by and recommended by staff for approval by staff to date, so.
good. Answer you.
Thank you, Ms. Mary. That brings to mind another question. Are swimming pools considered as auxiliary structures?
Through you, Mayor Mayberry.
So first question for you, Brad. Under the building code, what is the actual minimum size a house could be?
Ms. Mayor,
To get all of the things that are required in a house.
There is no prescriptive minimum building occupied floor area in the building code for the size of the dwelling. What's prescriptively required under Part 9 of the code is minimum areas and configurations of spaces within a building established as a dwelling. I know that's a mouthful of words, but it treats it qualitatively to make sure that the minimum provisions of health and safety are observed in the orientation of space where arranged as a dwelling. It's not concerned with gross numbers, it's concerned with quality of space and minimum health and safety requirements.
So if I add up those minimum safety, health and safety requirements, what's the number I come up with?
It depends on the orientation, like 2-story versus 1-story, that type of thing. But generally speaking, off the top of my head, it would probably, and the number that we're actually at the provincial level, we're kind of calculating and delivering this currently. But somewhere around the 60 to 70 square foot or square meter mark.
It's 600 square feet.
Approximately.
Then how come right now we have building permit, or permitted under that?
Sorry,
I thought read in the report that we could get down to 400 and some square feet.
it depends on the orientation. It's not a specific number. Trying to pin a number on the arrangement and orientation is difficult.
Because my understanding was that you could actually get a bathroom and everything else required in a house. It's slightly under 400 square feet.
in certain contexts, in urban areas, it may be possible.
Okay. All right, any other questions from council for clarification? Anyone in the public want to speak to this, to this application? Either in favor or opposed? Seeing none, then back to council for comments. Councilor Pickard, did you want us to ask?
No, I generally support what I've heard today, here today. I think it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? We need to go back out of public meeting. But yeah, all right, that's the end of the other one's on public meeting. Okay, thank you. So we need a motion and the rise from public meeting, moved by Justin, second by Gillis. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Go back into open council and we need a motion.
Approve.
Moved by Pickard, seconded by Way. That the recommendation here be approved. Any discussion? Seeing none, Councilor Yelman.
That's understood to be with the amended, lot coverages.
Yes. As recommended here. So the 225 maximum and the, I think it was 100.
Great.
Yeah. So, any other discussion? I just wonder, Brad, if you have some time, if you could help me understand the complexity of how small a house you could actually build that would meet all the health and safety issues, right? So not necessarily in public, but sometimes I appreciate understanding how to work better. Okay, any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Right.
Opposed? That's carried. Right, and we're now on to the Mud Oven secondary plan. Laurel, please.
Thank you, Mayor Mary. Paul, would you like to? Oh. Just. You were.
Okay.
Nice and close to. Oh.
Yes, good morning, everyone, again. So I'd like to recognize that my colleague Paul Michaels, the Director of Planning, is here to answer other specific questions with respect to this report. So I'm happy to be here to present the consideration of secondary planning for the village of Mount Elgin. We have been discussing this a bit amongst ourselves, and this, the purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the report that I submitted and answer any questions. So this will basically provide a snapshot of where we are now. And then what a secondary plan is, considerations, issues we've identified to date, and then potential next steps if the council does decide to move forward with this type of project. So in terms of background, Mount Elgin, as you know, is experiencing and expected to experience high levels of growth and development that will result in significant change. There is an interest in understanding how the township can develop a community-specific direction and tools for managing this growth and development as we move forward. So essentially, a way to coordinate future development and decisions with a shared vision, goals, and objectives, and provide a long-term and community-specific direction. Next slide, please. Thanks, Nicole. In terms of context, just a bit of a snapshot of Mount Elgin right now. There's a current land area of 131 hectares or 323.7 acres. There are approximately 300 households representing approximately 900 people, and that was to the end of 2024. There's a limited supply of vacant commercial land. There's an adequate supply of residential and industrial land. In terms of current uses, it's primarily residential and industrial, very limited commercial and public uses, including parks and open space, a community center, library, future town hall, future daycare, and a cemetery. In terms of the way the land is designated in the official plan, and table 1 and plate 4 illustrate that, which Nicole will bring up after this presentation. The majority of the land is designated for low density residential development, 58%. The next highest is designated for industrial development growth, 34%. And then school, service, commercial, community park, and village core are 4% or lower. So again, the majority of the land is designated for residential and industrial growth. Through the project that our policy team is working on, it's been determined that it's expected that a village boundary expansion will likely be required to accommodate the entirety of the forecasted residential and employment growth for the planning period. So that's the next 20 or 30 years. There is adequate existing and planned water and wastewater capacity to accommodate the forecasted residential and implement this growth. And that's assuming though that the industrial and commercial uses would be dry uses in nature. Next slide, please, Nicole. We also look at the context, the surrounding area, and that is on plate 5 of your package, which again, Nicole will bring up a little bit later. We have to consider the potential impacts of the surrounding land uses. They would be considered and assessed as part of a proposed settlement expansion. So we would look at the agricultural uses and the features on those properties, so livestock facilities, in considering where a settlement expansion would occur. We also need to look at the natural heritage features, including woodlands and aggregate resources. And plate 5 illustrates where those are in the area surrounding Mount Elgin. Next slide, please. So council and staff have identified some key issues and opportunities to date when considering doing a secondary planning exercise or some sort of planning exercise for Mount Elgin. And what I've heard are issues around access and transportation. So creating a safe, connected and walkable community. That the intersection of Plank Line and Mount Elgin presents challenges for establishing a core, also presents challenges for an integrated community and for safe pedestrian activity. The township's identified that there's a desire to create a unique sense of place and identity, so a downtown core per se. That business retention, expansion, and attraction are important. Right now, there are very limited opportunities to accommodate new businesses within existing buildings and or commercial areas. The township's also identified that new investment, new development, and population growth, managing that is the key priority. Based on our research, we anticipate that the population will add 800 plus households over the next 30 years. And there will also be substantial employment growth. So approximately 295 new residential lots or units have been recently approved and proposed in Mount Elgin. There is investment in infrastructure and public services, so wastewater treatment plant expansions, new municipal office and daycare and the new park. So these are the types of investment, development and population growth that are occurring right now and anticipated. Next slide. So as a planner, we have a number of different tools and processes to help manage growth and change. And that's always a challenge, managing growth and managing change in different communities. One of these tools is called the secondary plan. So what is the secondary plan? It's a more detailed plan for a specific geographic area. It can provide a vision, key principles, and more detailed policies than what's typically provided by the official plan. So it can provide detail and policies related to that specific geographic area and the specific items and opportunities that have been identified through the process. It's a more coordinated approach. And as I mentioned, the specific opportunities can be addressed through this plan. So the key components of a secondary plan are the vision. So what you want to see for the area, the goals and objectives. So specific achievable goals. So we want it to be pedestrian oriented, for example, or we want it to include a number of different land uses. So some overarching goals. And then the objectives would be the items that actually implement the goals. So pedestrian oriented, we want it pedestrian oriented, the objective would be, we want sidewalks to be connected. So you can measure these objectives and how you're implementing the vision and the goals for your area. Another key component is defining the secondary plan area, so having a specific geographic area that's defined. And then policies and tools that would guide future development in public projects. So a land use plan, it would guide the built form, guide the public realm design, mobility and linkages, so pedestrian orientation, vehicular transportation, it would guide natural and cultural heritage, infrastructure and utility systems, etc. So the secondary plan would include all these policies and tools, could include policies and tools that could guide future development for a number of different topics. So when you undertake a secondary planning process, there are a number of deliverables that we would anticipate that would come out of it. So one would be land use concepts, probably more than one, with recommended land use designations for council and the public to review and decide on the preferred approach. Recommended adjustments to the existing settlement boundary, if that was something that the township wished to pursue. Recommendations and justification for new or amended strategies, policies, bylaws, guidelines, and other tools to guide future growth. So design criteria, for example, new guidelines for how public space functions within the community. And then other plans and studies are usually part of the secondary plan. So a transportation plan schedule, a servicing plan schedule, and other types of tools. The recommendations from the secondary plan would form the basis for an amendment to the official plan, zoning bylaw, and other documents, and for assessing future development proposals. So the results of the secondary plan would be incorporated into the official plan and zoning bylaw and whatever other documents the township has that is necessary to ensure that the vision and the goals are incorporated into the tools that we have to help guide the future development in Mount Elgin. In terms of next steps, the township and planning staff would develop a terms of reference to establish the scope and expectations for a plan. We would determine a county and township staff project team and resources. We would identify and establish an adequate budget. We've included information on the approximate time frame it would take to complete this, which is about 12 to 18 months. And that depends on the complexity and scope. So if settlement expansion is anticipated as part of this, the type of consultation that council would wish to undertake, the supporting studies that are required if we need, a number of different studies, so a transportation study, natural resources study, and then consideration for other factors. So depending on the scope of the project that council wishes to undertake, that would influence the time frame required to complete this type of process. So I'm happy to answer questions on the process for secondary plan, the issues that have been identified to date. Paul is here to assist with answering questions on the land needs. Thank you, Nicole. The land needs work that's being done right now, the anticipated growth in the township.
Good, thanks very much, Rob. So questions from council on this? We've never done a secondary plan before, and so that's we only have one service village, which would be the area probably that would need it first. And through the housing committee, there has been some discussion around that as a community develops and grows, and we heard this before phase 6 was planned, that there was no amenities in the village. There's no amenities in the village, there's another population to support them. Then as you grow the village, then you need the amenities. And one of the concerns raised, pretty consistently has been, we don't have a strong commercial space that acts as a hub or a core for the thing. And how would we get, quite frankly, how would you get there so that you move from being really more of an expanded hamlet to an actual village where people and start to expect, certain services. And while there are some services, that probably are adequate for the size of the village today, as it grows, those services may not. So I think that's kind of where we started from on this. And it was through that and discussing the planning, okay, what we got to this point of maybe it's time for us to look at what would a secondary plan would be. So I don't know if council has any questions or whatever. But it seemed to me that regardless of what comes out of it, we should be at least thinking about what the future should or could look like. And this is, my mind, where you start trying to define and then design what the future of that, you know, hence the need for public consultation and that sort of thing. Comments from council? Councilor Weber.
Through the mayor to you. Planner. The cost for secondary planning, what a range you have listed here. Where would Mount Elgin fall in this range? Like, you got anywhere from $100,000 to $400,000.
Through you, Mayor Mayberry, it's a good question. A lot of it will depend on the, how we scope out the project. So what's required in terms of background studies, et cetera. If we want to incorporate a settlement area expansion as part of this, process, the level of public consultation, et cetera. So, in a lot of ways, I think that the township can scope this cost. And yes, this is quite a range, and I think, Paul, you've seen like 100,000, 400,000 in the county. And they, like, they do range just because of how we can scope them. Not sure I answered your question.
Yeah, maybe through the mayor, maybe we can add to that. Just for example, so when we've done secondary plan exercises, like we're just kind of fully contained just in the existing settlement boundaries, kind of looking at whether there's, you know, any change in the mix of uses and whether there's, you know, maybe different locations for commercial, whether you're gonna have more medium density, like just some of those things internal to the settlement boundary. Those exercises kind of been towards the lower end of the spectrum, I would say, and then larger exercises where you're both doing that as well as looking at the settlement expansion. So then you've got more need for engineering studies to look at extension of services, capacity, stormwater management, things like that, and the technical studies to evaluate impacts on the features if you expanded the settlement boundary in those particular directions. Those are more towards the upper end of the scale. So I guess a recent example would be the secondary planning that we're undertaking for Tavistock. It's probably the $350,000 range because they've got 2 settlement areas they're looking at. And there's a sort of a host of environmental features and other things that need to analyze as part of that project. So it's towards the upper end of that spectrum. And I think as noted in the report, typically the county with 50% cost share on the studies, if it's related to the need for growth and a settlement expansion. We haven't historically participated in the ones that are just in kind of internal reevaluation of your land uses with settlement.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Buck.
I just wondered, with a major highway through there, in the past, we've had difficulties, working with them on, different scenarios, how much would they be involved in this kind of, official planning?
Yep, through you, Mayor Mayberry, the MTO, is that the administrator?
MTO, yeah.
So I have been in contact with them, to provide, to get data for this report, and they've been very forthcoming and, happy to provide information and data with us, so they would be a necessary part of this project. And, they're aware that this report has been, presented, and they would definitely be part of this discussion. I believe that, you know, we would definitely have to take their recommendations into account when we're looking at where to align downtown core or identity or things because of that pilot, right? But they are definitely participating with providing good information.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would have to say I represent the majority of Mount Elgin at this current time, and the number one concern is through the village. I mean, it makes it, at least in the residents mind, unsafe for pedestrian traffic. And so my number one goal in that village is to somehow team that beast that is that highway. And we've found historically that the MTO is largely reactionary in their approach to traffic calming measures rather than being proactive.
Mhm.
And so kind of dovetailing with Councilor Buchner's question, how do we still maintain control over the design of the village such that the MTO doesn't end up designing the village by default by what they will allow and what they will not allow? How do we, for lack of better terms, exert pressure such that we get the results that we want and not necessarily build the village the way the MTO says we need to do?
Through you, Mayor Mayberry. Nicole, could you bring up the other map? So, currently, these are the land use designations. This is just a simplified, map that is perhaps a little bit easier to look at. So right now, you can see where the village core is designated right now. It sort of straddles the highway. So through this exercise, I think part of what's important is looking at these designations, looking at the land uses, the way they are anticipated right now, and questioning, is this the way the village should grow? Do we have another idea? Would it make more sense to string more development towards the west to orient? So I would say that, you know, enhanced communication with MTO is definitely on the table, and I would ensure that, you know, we have a lot of communication with them to determine what their parameters are with respect to managing the corridor. But I believe that through this process, we can also look at how to orient growth and how to orient change in a way that is suitable for Maverick and its residents.
But
I guess just my fear, looking specifically at this one, my fear is that we're going to end up, because of the highway, we're gonna be focusing all the growth to the west of the highway. And we're effectively gonna split off the eastern portion of the village from even being part of the village over a period of time. And I very much do not want to see that happen.
Through you, very, thank you for the comment. And I think in the report, we have, you know, talked about coordinating an integrated village, which could be defined as a key principle that people want to see maintained in the role. And hopefully through public consultation, we would hear items like that as well. I think it's also important, though, to establish what we can and cannot leverage as part of this, and then figure out how to manage within those parameters. But we have recorded those thoughts, and we're aware of that. So thank you very much.
any other questions or comments? So I guess part of the process will be to get public input and feedback as to how they see the village. And the reality is that there's been some angst within the community, a fair degree of angst around the current expansion that's sort of taking place now, and they're probably will be reluctant to become actively engaged. But if we want to envision something for the future, we want to be very different to be part of it. And we don't all get what we want, but we should all be willing to be part of that. Part of my concern is, and I would agree, I don't want to create a village where there's two sides of the tracks. In this case, two sides of a plank line. On the other hand, you also want to make sure that as you're looking down the road, you're saying, what is the greatest benefit to make it, or what is the best vision to make it a livable place where people actually want to be and call their homes. So I'm not a planner, anything like that. That all up to you, but I do worry about that. And to simply say, well, we're gonna move all commercial over to the west side and along Mount Elliott Road, for example, I don't think solves the whole problem. And that's where, quite frankly, I'm in favor of doing a secondary plan as long as we get community involvement in as much as I think what the community wants. And also, I don't have a sense as to, at the moment, as to any potential village expansion. Before you get to a point of, this is, you know, beyond the capacity of, the ability to service, whether it be water, wastewater, whatever. And then you're looking at another step, which would be a major building new facilities or, you know, piping, sewage, for example, or so, so. I think all of those things need to be part of this larger conversation. But we also need the people of the community to be actively engaged in that larger conversation. Other comments, Councillor White?
Yeah, through the matter of the planner. That map that's up on the screen right now, that industrial area, the brown area or whatever it is, colorblind doesn't matter, but. Is that already designated all industrial now? That is it. That big block.
Through you, Mayor, yes, it's in the official plan that is designated for industrial, anticipated industrial, yes.
Okay.
It's not zoned that way right now,
That's gonna be my next.
yes, but it is designated industrial, correct?
And it's all within the village limits,
Correct, yeah.
so good. Anything further on this? Go ahead, Paul.
Just one little point to add, 'cause it might help council kind of conceptualize it for the future. So if you were to achieve the forecasted growth for the village that Laurel spoke to, then at the end of the 30-year planning period, the size of this village, or sorry, would be roughly the size of, say, Tavistock or Hemsford. So if you think about the types of uses there, types of commercial services, that's kind of about the ballpark of what your size would be at the end of that 30-year period, if you achieve all those households.
That's helpful as well, so. Okay. Anything further? Not seeing any, thanks very much for being here, we'll be in touch, I mean, what the recommendation was. It wasn't, that was there. Right. So, all right, so, the question, Julie just raising was, do we want to proceed with terms of reference discussion as to what exactly would happen in the secondary plan? Councilor,
I'd like to see this move forward, yes.
okay, just, I'm guessing now this is gonna be a 2026 budget item. So, are you moving that we move forward with, discussing in terms of reference and this is at a staff level? You're moving that to secondary, seconded by way. Any discussion on that? Councilor,
So this would then give us some idea as to what kind of cost we might be looking at and be able to factor that into the 26 budget process then.
I think it would probably give us a sense of exactly what we need to do as far as public consultation and what's commitment from various parties. So I better leave the next comment was going to be, but let's finish this motion and we'll move on to what my next question would be. So anything further on this? In terms of reference, doesn't commit us to anything, it just gives us a better idea as to what the way forward might be. Okay. And any further discussion? All those in favor of terms of reference discussion with staff? Okay. Opposed, that's carried. Next question was terms of reference, and then the next piece would be potential for expanding the limits of the village. Is that under the terms of reference, or would that be with or without? Because I think understanding, you know, where the future is, how big is it going to grow? The Paul's point, we're going to be as big as Tavistock, or we're going to be somewhat smaller, and so I don't know.
So
Would the planning staff be recommending at least a cursory look at the potential boundary expansion?
through you, Mayor Mayberry, based on the work that the policy team has done, I believe that a cursory look at a set of potential boundary expansion. It would be wise to include that in the terms of reference. Would you?
Yeah, maybe just add that. Yeah, I think we would include it in the terms of
Yeah.
reference, and talk about what would be required to do that. I mean, council will have some decisions to make. Because there is that 20-year to 30-year range that you think you have the option of planning for, so 20-year being the bottom end, 30-year kind of being the top end. So how much of that you want to plan for is part of the exercise if you're undertaking it, and those things can be discussed. And then as you pointed out, Mayor, what within the servicing capacity, are we sure that 30 years within the servicing capacity, or that open up a whole new set of considerations? So yes, I think we've had that identified in the terms of reference, but what I would mention is that what we have done in the past is said, okay, well, if you're looking for bids back on a process, what would it look like to just kind of reevaluate the existing settlement boundary and then determine the need for settlement expansion, and then would that be the second component to it, if you will, that you could, proceed with or not? And part of the reason that you might split it out is, we identified that there's that large employment area, industrial lands to the north. Is any of that suitable for some other use other than industrial, where you maybe look at your industrial opportunities in another location, for instance? So then what does that land become? Does it absorb some of your residential, commercial growth? And then what does that do for your need for other types of land? So it'll kind of, that first part will almost inform the second part, if you will. So, yeah, we put both in there, I guess, short answer.
That's, no, that's, Julie,
I just want to get clarification on the motion. So was the intention to approve the recommendation in the staff report, and that includes issuing the request for proposal to initiate comprehensive secondary plan and study for the village of Manhagan, including the development of appropriate terms of reference and identifying an appropriate budget. So that.
I think that's wider than what I thought the motion
Right,
was.
that's.
Answer your motion.
And just looking for that.
Want to start with preparation of terms of reference and then review and consider that and then look at next steps.
Okay,
That's what the motion was.
Yes, so I just.
that was what your intention was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think that's what council was thinking of, so,
okay,
okay.
that's great.
So we'll leave the RFP process out until we solve the terms of reference.
Yeah, no, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything further on this? Seeing none, thank you very much. We did good on that. So, thanks very much, Laurel and Paul for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, next is the CEO's report. CEO 13, Mary Ellen.
Report CAO 13/2025 is before council today, seeking direction from council in regards to the definition of components that are to be included in the final design of the proposed municipal building. What we're currently looking at, based on discussions, are a municipal office, childcare center with 88 spaces, the library with 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, and a council chamber with dual use design space. So SPH Engineering has been working on this project. The next step would be for council first to confirm the components, and the second is to involve an architect at a preliminary level with the design. So the estimated cost of that design, including the architect, is $13,500 plus applicable tax. There's background information contained in the report as well, that summarizes the past discussion. The cost was already discussed. Confirmation, so we do require confirmation on the project scope so we can get moving on this if we're to stay within the time frame that council had outlined previously. Based on the estimated cost, we also would recommend, it should have been included in the report, that the cost of $13,500 plus applicable tax be taken or funded through the management reserve. And I think you'd happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from council? Councilor Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the biggest question I have in my mind, having seen the initial drawings and having seen an initial cost estimate, is how badly do we want to be in the childcare business? Basically, this building is gonna cost us just shy of $3.5 million per floor. And the overall cost of the project is considerably higher than what I had anticipated. Should it go through as proposed, so we have to decide, I think, how badly do we want to be in the childcare business? And the second to that, how committed is Oxford County Library to paying the rent on that side of the facility? And should that not work out, what other options would there be for that space?
Other comments? Counselor Webb.
Mayor. I kind of agree with what Councilor Yipman has said. This number that we bumped at our last meeting was a lot higher than what I ever anticipated. Maybe we need to rethink what we actually want in this building. And I think, again, Councilor Yipman said, the size of the library to me, I thought was exponentially large compared to what we existing have in Mount Alvin now. So maybe we just need to step back and just think what we actually want to have in this building. Because I think the cost that was presented 2 weeks ago was a lot higher than I ever anticipated.
Other comments? Counselor Gilbert.
Yeah, I recognize the comments that have previously been mentioned. I do think that, this is an opportunity for us to have a space for childcare. I think it is a need in the community, not just within the village, within the rural area itself. There's shortfall, everywhere. People looking for, places to put their kids and to be able to work, or to be able to be in the community. So I think it is a challenge. Whether it needs to be that big or not, I don't know. But obviously it has to be of a certain size to attract a person to be able to run that facility too. So I think that needs to be considered. Yeah, I do have concern for that size of area for a library, and if it didn't work out, what would happen? Unfortunately, yeah, the cost seemed a little higher than I perceived, but unfortunately, the way building construction and everything's going, I don't think it'll ever get cheaper. So I think that if this is something that we want to move forward with, we should think about and move along, because if we delay it, it's just gonna cost us more money in 5-10 years down the road than what's being presented here, I think.
Any other, Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo what Councillor Gillis has just said. There is a need for childcare in our community. Our community is growing. And as far as the library, and it needing a large space, Mr. Mayor, did you not say at our last meeting there were requirements for the library?
I think the requirements was 2,500 square feet. I was gonna ask about that too. The 4,000 to 5,000, is that the additional space that would also be part of the council chambers? That was my understanding, of that.
There's,
Dual use.
dual use, how that is done, is part of the design process.
Right.
Yes, dual use is part of it.
So the 4,000 to 5,000 square feet is actually maybe 25, and I'm just saying maybe 2,500 square feet of library, and the rest would be somewhere in that range. It would be dual use.
Potentially.
Go ahead, Julie.
And that was based on understanding that the county of Oxford was looking at the area for a regional plan.
Yes.
So county library, the only thing is a regional library, which
Regional library.
requires, that's where you get 25,000 square feet. But, anyways. Sounds like there's a couple of questions we want to maybe explore a little further. One would be on, the actual child care area, and the other would be on the library. I haven't got an answer back on what we see, that, central branch actually is for the library. Councilor,
having a dual purpose space also raises the need to identify some sort of cost structure for that as well, because it wouldn't be a full-time rent for either the library or a full-time use for council, so that would have to be addressed somehow.
Alright,
So this project is still at a high level. This is not a commitment to go to tender or to go to bid. Because there's a lot of information that's not been provided, or that we do not know yet as far as this is concerned. Confirmation of those, components would be a confirmation of space. And how that space is utilized, it may not mirror exactly what's in this report. So there's Monalban's potential growth is a growth village. This 13,600 that's being looked at being invested is taking the design to the next step. With all the, what we discussed previously and putting a little bit of polish on it from an architect. There's gonna be a great deal more work required, depending on what council wants to see in that building moving forward. This is a step in that process. So if we were to stop this now, we're looking at, for sure, we will not be needing the construction projection that council is looking at for early 2026. And that is fine if that is what council wants. But this is spending additional funds to try to get us more clear definition on design. And that is not saying that the design is cast in stone. Because it can be changed, but it's giving the concept of space and usage.
Councilor,
Take that advice with thanks, but at the same time, to move forward. Without having, some clear picture as to what we want to accomplish with that building is largely wasting somebody's time and some of this 13,000 that we're proposing to spend now. I think we have to have it in mind, do we want 2 or 3 floors? Or even just 1 floor? And do we want the daycare in there or not? And it's not that I'm opposed to the daycare, it's just at these costs. I'm also very aware of the fact that we have to answer to the taxpayers of this township. And so that causes me some hesitation. At the same time, I recognize that there is a need. And so if the majority of council is prepared to say, yes, this is something we want, I'm not gonna stand in the way of that because I can make an argument for it as well. So we have to be clear on what we want, and I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time talking about that because we already have. But we need to nail down, yes, we want daycare in there, no, we don't want daycare in there. In terms of the size or the usefulness of that space. I fail to see how we would divvy it up any differently, really, in terms of the daycare in particular, because you're not gonna put multiple uses on the same floor with the daycare. So I think we need to nail that down, probably now. So that we can keep this thing moving forward, because I am in favor of this project.
If we're looking at, if we're looking at future growth in the village of Mount Albert. And talking about needing more commercial space, for example, within the village. There is potential, although council hasn't talked about it. If there's any of the tenants or any of this that doesn't work out, it will also, it could very well create space for commercial use in the village. For whatever that might be. I agree that you don't necessarily want to build based on what could be. I understand that, the not wanting to commit to that. But the 13,500 at this point with what we've spent to date. Would just, I've already said this, would polish up what's been done, but will not commit. To that. It's a proposal.
Okay, other comments? Councilor Gillis and Councilor White.
So then, further to that, I'm not in disagreement with the things that are proposed within this building. I am unsure of the size of the capacity of the things that are listed here, but I'm not opposed to all of these functioning within one building. And I think that maybe that would be something either engineers, someone would figure out, or someone way smarter than myself. Because That's what we need to hear. I think that there are effects that this building will have on another building within Mount Ogden, and whether it be great expense to expand it or what's gonna happen there in the future. We also have to think about money that will be spent differently, depending on what is done with this facility. But obviously with the growth anticipated in Mount Ogden, we should figure this one out because, the effects will be great within the whole village, so.
That's all right, isn't it?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Clarification, you mentioned when we talked about the library, you said there were county library and regional library.
Well, it's a size, so they have
So
village
there's a
library,
difference in the
regional,
size between.
and large libraries like Ingersoll and Towson. So 2,500 square feet is kind of their, what they call regional size. For our discussion, probably doesn't matter.
Okay.
I think they would be, you know, looking at 2,500 square feet as being a reasonable size for the site village. Okay. Other comments? Councilor Burger.
Just for clarification, that the total value of this building that they were quoting, is that with all furnishings and everything else included? Yeah,
No, there's, furnishings aren't included. There's a lot of things, there's things that are not included in that. I think he did actually in one of his reports, look at that. So no, there are significant costs that are not included. Because certainly even furnishings alone would be, over $100,000, for example. At least, I think in, Blanford Glen, it was 221,000 and Tiller, it's 176,000 furnishings. And they didn't furnish the daycare and Tiller, the daycare did. Yeah. So.
Other comments? Councilor Yep.
What's the likelihood that daycare would be revenue neutral at least?
So, my guess, but I don't know.
So we're gonna have to subsidize it is what you're anticipating?
The rent we would get, I would be surprised if it would pay the full, cost.
So in the design, for Zord, for example, all of the utilities, hydro, et cetera, are tied to municipal office. They pay the full cost of any utilities utilized in the daycare. That, I don't know what that would look like for the township, but that's just an example of them. So there's fixed rate for the daycare and the provision of that service as far as rental space is concerned.
So, in my particular case, personally, I don't think I'm ever gonna need childcare. The other end of the spectrum there, but I do think that it probably is an essential service, especially going forward. And whether we supply it in Mount Ogden or whether it's supplied somewhere else, people are gonna face exactly the same situation, as if it's not a lucrative business to be in. So, part of my thinking about this is, if, whether I want to or not, I think childcare actually has become an essential service that needs to be provided. And it's unfortunately in my mind, a municipal service. And that means us. So, and, happy to debate with anybody whether yeah, I'm not pretty good, but I think going forward, the requirement for people to be working and gainfully employed in the community, be able to stay in the community, is going to be somewhat dependent on where the children can go before they start school. And so, yeah, I'm kind of convinced that we need to provide childcare. Whether this is the model we want to do it in, I think we need the steps, but seems to me if we're gonna build a building, it would be logical to have a municipal building. To keep everything the same sort of general area. But Councilor Berkeley, you want to say?
I was just wondering if, we're locked into the design with this company. Or we can look at another one that may have a different, design type and was, cost per square foot would be significantly less. Than what's quoted for this one.
Yeah, so we're not tied to any contract or any firm at this point. A lot of the information that we're getting with SPH is to help us get a conceptual drawing and what council is looking at. There's still the opportunity to go to design build. For example, there are firms out there that specialize in that. Or to look at having an engineering firm or architectural firm do the drawings and then have a second contractor ready to do the work. The issue that can arise, because Zora did it, architect, engineer, construction company, no. I think they did the design build type thing. But when you don't do design build, and then you have, we mentioned this at Fire Hall 3, you have the architect engineering firm saying that, well, that wasn't our faux pas in the design, for example, that was really the builder who did that. So then you have conflicting scenario where the builder's saying, no, that was in the design. The designer says, no, that was the builder. And then the municipality stuck in the middle was trying to work it out. The benefit to design build is that it's all in the same house, so same wheel. But it is something that will be looked at moving forward.
Go ahead.
Fair enough. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if the moving forward with this part of the process would then give us the chance to consider if we want to actually prepare a request for proposal for construction. And at that stage is when we would get more of the detailed information about what the actual cost would be. And the estimate that was provided, it wasn't an actual quote to do the work. Or even a commitment with SPH that if we were to go through them, that's what their cost would be. But if we continue with the next steps in the concept plans and architectural design, then we could look at what a request for proposal might look like and different options for construction and things like that, get a better idea of cost. Like actual building costs.
Whether that's 2 floors or 3 floors.
So where are we on this? Go ahead, Councilor.
A few comments. One of the things that's probably not included in any of these cost estimates yet either is landscaping, paving parking lots, all that sort of thing, which is gonna add significant cost to the project as well. To Councilor Grugner's comment about the potential for a different firm coming up with a cheaper alternative. Also, the flip side of that is the more firms you involve in the project, the more of the $13,000 parity you're gonna start looking at because everybody's got to prepare the report. And so we're gonna nibble away at any savings that we might have. Third comment, the round figure of the $450 per square foot that was provided to us at the last meeting is just a very high level. Kind of based on industry averages right now, it's possible that our actual final number for this project might fall either below or above that. Right, so we don't know that yet either. And fourth comment is, I'm not opposed to the daycare. And I'm willing to support it. I just want to make sure that we have looked at all the options here and that we've discussed this legitimately. And so to Mayor Mayberry's comment about that this is an essential service. Recreation facilities in this township have been identified as being drastically underfunded for a very long time. And I've heard just recently as this weekend, we need an HVAC in the township. And yet we decided we don't want any part of that because it would be a guaranteed money loser. It is in almost every community that has one. And so our solution to that is to send money to Ingersoll, Tillsonburg, Woodstock, whatever, in order to help defer their costs on that. And so is it feasible to do the same with daycare? Just, I want to ask the question so that we get it out on the table, we hash this out, and that in the end, if we do decide to build daycare, that we've done it for the right reasons.
Councilor Durkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is my opinion that we need to look after the children in our community. We also need to educate them. That's what I feel.
Other comments? Go ahead, Ryan.
So we are is looking at just the municipal office components. We're at the point here where, we are going to be moving a full-time staff person into the council chamber, because we're en route. So it's how much longer we are going to continue to do that. So just looking at it from just the build component. There certainly are a lot of other things to look at, but, childcare makes it possible for people to work. It gives them, a safe space for the children to go and to work, so that they can work. I'm not saying that that they have to have a daycare, but we definitely need an office. And if there's something else can be added to give benefit to the community, that certainly is something that council will be considering. But from a very basic approach, we are out of space in this office. So just putting that out there as well.
I would argue that for a whole lot less money, we could just add to this building. But we already are. Not suggesting that because I actually think the daycare is probably a higher municipal concern for the people of Southwest Oxford than is the administrative building addition. So I would seems to me it's how can we help invest provide to the greatest number of needs? And I think point made earlier about the space utilized by the library and the current community center already has a secondary purpose for it and for another purpose for it if we don't use it. So to me, that's you can say it's a small cost saving. I don't think it's a huge one, but well, anyways, I'm just looking for which direction we're going here. Councilor Gillis.
Well, I kind of think this is the last step in the road here, that if we move forward now with this next step, the next time we have this conversation, it's gonna be a yes or no. Moving forward. So I think at this time we should proceed as the staff suggestion. And they've heard our feedback from this meeting and go from there and what they come back with.
Are you moving our recommendation? Let's say yes. You have a second. Councilor Buckner, you're seconding it?
Yes.
And the motion is resolved, council, sorry, moved by Gillis, second by Dr. Resolved, council receive report CEO 13/2025 information to the council by direction staff. See with the inclusion of the following components in a final building design, municipal office, child care spaces, library, council chamber, with dual use design space, and have deliberately left the date where they sized out, so that there's some flexibility there. And further, the council authorized continuing professional engineering services with SPH Engineering to continue the project's conceptual design, including review of the plans by our architecture, at an estimated cost of $13,500 plus political costs. Oh, and further, the council authorizes the funding to come from the management reserve.
You take,
That agree with
you take final,
Good.
we can take components in the final buildings and take for
Oh. Mayor, would like to remove the word, the recommendation final. In the, okay. That's the motion, any discussion? Councilor,
So the size of the library is not part of this motion anymore.
I was leaving it out, but, because I don't think we want to define the library as 4 or 5,000 square feet. You should go ahead.
My thought moving forward, this motion is if we told staff our concerns, we didn't make limits on this, then they can come back with the next report. And we can go from there.
So, it's a, Councilor Dixon is agreeing, okay. Any other discussion? Councilor Pickard, any comments? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm very concerned the way this is headed. There's a lot more money than I ever imagined. I guess we're not committing ourselves to this, but it still comes down to whether it should be 2 floors or 3. That's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Building services monthly activity report, Brad.
Morning again, Mayor, Council, purpose of this report is to update council, with respect to building, department activities over, the months of April and May. Quick summary here, activity over April, 7 permits issued, 22 applications received, various states of completeness. Highlights to May, 11 permits issued over that period of time. Whereas 15 applications received over that same period. Brief update to further, the previous report to council. The chief building official's introductory report that relates to the annual report update. So staff have proceeded to discuss internally and collect relevant data sufficient to put forth that report as quickly as possible. We're also gathering resources here for purposes of building bylaw update as previously reported to council. And lastly here, a quick update as relates to the services, the contract services provided by RSM. So as of the date of writing this report, 8 applications currently in process, proceeding towards issuance or essentially a state where we would have to revoke or refuse the permit application if it did not end up complying. Beyond that, do you want to report an error that I did pick up here in the last couple of minutes? So that financial implications number does look a little bit odd because it's missing a 1, a fairly important one. There it should have read $11,497,720 as relates to the cost of construction. Apologies. Questions or concerns on it?
Okay, thanks, Brett. Any questions or comments? Councilor Bugner.
I was just concerned about the high number of ones that came in not complete. What's the biggest problem with that?
It's a very good question for you, Mr. Mayor. I do like providing this metric to council for purposes of giving us some insight as to the regular process of submission of documentation sufficient to issue a permit to province of Ontario. It's in some cases a fairly high hill, especially for people that are new to the process. So when they first come in, they quite often submit paperwork which they may have been led to believe is sufficient for purposes of issuance, and then they find out through the process that there's additional documentation required or sufficient design resolution that needs to be confirmed, and the process eventually builds towards that complete status. Cloud permit and other administrative tools encourage the submission of the application process building to the point of compliance for issuance. It's a tool that, in my experience, is helpful to both our process and the community, in that it provides a good tool to coordinate and communicate with applicants over time. But the days of simply signing an application or a piece of paper and then shuffling it over a counter to issue a permit, under the current regulations, those states are a long past us, and that is not necessarily my rules. That is just the rules as we find them. So.
Councilor Witt, you're next.
Yeah, through the mayor to CBO, my question was very similar to what Councilor Bugner had talked about, was the ones that were incomplete. Over the last 2 months, that's 30 building permits that were incomplete. Are there chances that they will come back with a complete one in the next month or 2 months?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I hope so. Yeah, no, in almost indefinitely, that this is, I don't want to give the impression that this is some type of new metric to the regular building services in the township. I'm just simply reporting to kind of give you a bit more insight as relates to the normal processes of application review and issuance. In my experience over my years as a building official, there's nothing new or unusual about this type of builded process. There are other models out there, but I don't think they're suitable to a municipality or a community such as Swaps. Other municipalities do intake and review within a period of 48 hours, and rather than allow the person to continue with the application process to fulfill complete application processes, simply reject the application.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So by and large, over the last number of years, this township has been built on a basis of customer service. And so my question to you is there a possibility that when somebody comes in for a permit, and is there a possibility to be able to give them a list of requirements that would take them from A to Z on the list of requirements, such that when they come back in, they have every condition met, so that they're not constantly having to go back and add another layer and add another layer and add another layer, and thus delaying their projects beyond what's reasonable?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, absolutely. Part of the other components of the report, I hope, provide the steps necessary to that process. So the revision to the building bylaw, to provide prescriptive lists of, not essentially a compliance checklist, but prescriptive lists of documentation to include for a normal application process relevant to a new house, or building a new deck, or building a new storage farm, or building a new hospital, whatever it happens to be. Something that appears to be absent from the building bylaw at current, and then establishing other related policy related to the application submission and communication processes. So as we build, as we go forward, I hope to work with council to build those tools and to help strengthen communication relative to that service-based relationship with the.
Any other questions? So I guess mine would be along the same idea, but struggling to see so many incomplete, which says either we're doing a poor job with the application so that people don't know how to figure carefully or properly. To Councilor Yurgen's comment about or giving them a right checklist of things to do. Or people are just aren't bothered. This is good enough. I guess part of me wants, would be encouraging to the idea of being a public service oriented municipality is if somebody brings in an incomplete one, a staff there to help them say, okay, this is what we've missed here, this is what we've missed there. This is the report we actually need for A, B, or C. So to me, that's the kind of customer service we want, so that the and expedite the process as much as possible, and yet still cover the legislative requirements of issues, because what I'm telling you, the company ABC. So that would be my encouragement, wherever possible, whoever staff are there to help them understand what's missing, and rather than going home and thinking what it is you're possible to fill out the rest of it right there, or they have to go for two things, but I'd rather we do that than go over candidates.
Through your to address your comments, I agree completely. 2 points. Anecdotally, building permit processes are unusual processes. In that they're not daily life processes that everybody can be expected to just know as a consequence of normal everyday life. It's a bit, when I talk to people about it, sometimes it depends on the level of complexity of the project, but in comparison, it's a bit like the difference between first submitting your application documentation for your first passport, or as opposed to submitting for a renewal of a passport. The process of renewing a passport, once you're familiar with it, and the process related to that is far more simplified. The checks behind the scene are far more simplified at the various agency levels. So that kind of difference, that differentiation, is important to remember, that not all buildings are equal, not all people engaged in the system are equal. Some are more familiar with the system than others, and others are less equipped for that reason, so that's why we do encourage. Applicants to engage the services of professional designers, builders, people that are regularly engaged in this system so that they can help expedite that process as early in this, my model on that as early and often as possible. Beyond that, the application process, communication is key. In terms of building that process of application, it's very much like a passport process, again, where you have to go and you have to get your photo taken at someone who is authorized to take the pictures, and you may not have known that first time you filled it out. They want you to use all capital letters and all of these other process related requirements. It does build over time. So if you think about how long it took you to gather all the information for that type of a process, quite often it's a matter of weeks or could be months in some cases. In the building permit process context, that process of leading up to a building permit submission complete application can be quite long, and it's quite dependent upon the larger industry. So designers and builders and their scheduling and their ability to provide staff and resources towards building that resolution for the design resolution for the client solution. I do like using that metric with council because it engages everybody and we get to talk this through. And it also demonstrates that this is a throughput process and we're not here to stop the throughput nature of building permits. We're just here to make sure that the necessary components are present in a project as it moves forward in time to the point where it's ready to actually put shovels in, put stakes in the air.
Yeah, I think the data was actually important for us to know where that we have that many. So that we can deal with it. We're hoping that we're actually gathering more data. About a lot of different things, that we're gonna be able to utilize in that regard for an improvement. So certainly, while the number seems very high, and I was actually surprised by it. It certainly gives us what we need to say, okay, we need to spend some energies on this.
One additional, further to everyone's point, it is interesting, this particular report is excellent for demonstrating this, where what I like to pass on to council over my career is that one part that people are generally not cognizant of is that the building department is not in control of the volume button. So how fast and how complex the applications come in at a particular time, we have no way of regulating that. We have no way of determining when people are going to submit applications. So the report you have before you is perfectly demonstrative of that type of, we're not in control of the volume button from April to May. And of course, it's construction season, it's busy season, right? Yeah, we went, according to the numbers here, 22 applications in April. That would have, if we had reported that in March, it would have been significantly less than that. But everybody wants the same things at the same time through the same process. So where we don't have full control of our own busyness for the volume button, it becomes a lot of change at certain times.
Anything further on this? The encouragement that we want to actually be is public service oriented and encourage people to help them any way we can as often as we can without jeopardizing the safety and well-being of people. So, anything further on the report? Okay, the motion receives information. Moved by White, second by Gillis, to go to report DD 07/2025 to receive information, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. And I think we're on the drainage report, the Heron Mountain Drain. Go ahead. Daniel.
Okay. Purpose of this report is to bring forward a petition for drainage works submitted in accordance with section 4 of the Drainage Act. signed by Jan, Jeanette, and Rudy Van Barneveld. Jan, Jeanette, and Rudy are wanting to add a new branch drain to the Deer Allen drain, which is currently under section 78 improvement. Headway Engineering are already appointed under section 78 for the Deer Allen drain improvement. Therefore, staff are recommending that Headway Engineering be appointed under section 4 to add a new branch drain to the Deer Allen drain.
Any questions from council? They're straightforward, they want to drain, you don't have any problems with them adding another section to it, so. All right. No questions from council, do we have a motion? Moved by Yipma, seconded by Bookner, resolved that the council of Township of Southwest Auckland accept petition for drainage works received from Jan, Jeanette, and Rudy Van Barneveld. And further, the firm of Headway Engineering be appointed to add a new branch drain to the Highland Allen drain in accordance with section 4 of the Drainage Act, all of 1990, chapter 7P, appointed schedule. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now down to, thanks very much, Naima. Seal. Seal 35/2025, Julie, please.
Thank you, Mayor Mayberry. This report has been prepared in response to council's request for information regarding the proposed wind energy developments within the township and concerns we've heard from members of the public. It is intended to serve as an overview to help clarify the township's role in the development process for renewable energy projects and to summarize the current stage of the two proposals currently within Southwest Oxford. This report provides a high-level outline of the approval process required under the Independent Electricity System Operators Framework and the point in that process where municipal input, such as a municipal support resolution, would typically be requested. It also explains what role the township plays in either supporting or declining to support a proposed renewable energy project. In addition to outlining the process and at the request of council, this report summarizes the key themes and concerns raised by residents so far, including questions around land use, loss of agricultural land, property values, potential health impacts, and the visual appearance of turbines on the rural landscape. I want to acknowledge that there's a significant amount of information available on this topic, both in support of and in opposition to wind energy, highlighting its potential benefits and associated challenges. The purpose of this report today is for information only. No decisions are being requested of council today. The intent is simply to support an informed and balanced discussion to ensure clarity around the township's role. Should a formal request for municipal support come forward in the future for one of the current proposals. There are planning staff here today. If there are any questions in relation to process for wind energy development in the county, particularly regarding when in the process council support may be requested. And I also just want to mention that I have reached out to the Independent Electricity System Operator to inquire about any opportunities that there may be for a representative to attend a future council meeting to speak about electricity supply and demand in Ontario, as well as the current procurement processes and related topics such as energy pricing and contract rates. And I'll be happy to bring forward any information I receive from them on that to council at a later date. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Good, so questions from council? None? One, under the AIA terms of reference, impact terms of reference. It says that this terms of reference must be reviewed and approved by municipal planning staff before the AIA can commence. So does that mean that council doesn't approve agricultural impact assessment?
They don't, county planning staff approves the terms of reference. Once that's approved and the AIA is complete, then that comes forward to council for review and acceptance.
So my question is, council doesn't necessarily see the terms of reference until after, and if they're not satisfied with the terms of reference, then we just waste a whole lot of time. So, terms of reference, you say you've got to examine these 5 things, and council says, no, you've got to examine those 5 plus 2 more. Why wouldn't we see a draft terms of reference?
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't understand your question. I'm gonna ask if planning staff could comment on that.
Through you, Mayor Mayberry, my colleagues,
Fine up there.
April Nixon and Emily Sousa are here, they're in our policy planning team. Actually, April is the new director of policy plan manager. And they're here to assist with explaining some of the process issues, so April, if
Thank you. So typically when we review terms of references, and reviewing a terms of reference is not new to any kind of development application, whether it's for energy, whether it's for a subdivision, whether it might be for a new, maybe there's a use proposed on a farm, when things need to go through a zone change or some sort of a planning act application. Oftentimes with some of the technical reports, we will ask for a terms of reference. Terms of references help ensure that there is agreement on the overall approach and scope of a study before they go do all the work on the study. Most often we use terms of references for environmental studies to make sure that there's an agreement on the scope, so that if you go to study the frogs, you know to do that in the spring, and we agree where you're doing that, because if you miss it, you might have to wait another whole year before you can do that. So, you know, making sure there's agreement on scope and approach from the outset is really, really key for these studies. One, to provide efficiencies and also to provide clarity. So the discussions to date around the AIA terms of reference have been looking at policies that we have currently in the official plan around requirements for ag impact assessments. It also builds from other available guidance from the province. The province also released, specific to energy, just in the last week and a half or so, an updated addendum document that is specific to energy. So it helps provide a little bit more guidance and direction on AIAs for energy. However, it's not a fulsome guidance document on completing ag impact assessments. We're still waiting for the fulsome document from the province. There is a draft that was released in about 2018. So we do have that as a resource, and we have been asking some other questions to colleagues at the Ministry of Agriculture as well to inform our own review. One of the other challenges with this AIA is the way the province has now set this up. We're talking about it in two parts. So this first part is really to look at consideration of alternatives. That could be alternative locations, both in terms of other scenarios within, say, a township context or the broader county. It could be providing a rationale for why they want to be in a prime ag area at all. Those types of things have to get addressed. The more detailed mitigation about exactly where, say, a turbine might go, where a road might go, how construction layouts might work, how accesses would work. Those types of things would be more readily addressed through the second part. That second part of the AIA, the province is saying proponents would have to complete within 18 months if they get a contract. We're looking for those proponents then to make sure that that timeline lines up with their Planning Act application, because that AIA document is going to also be part of that zone change that will come later in the process. So there is some overlap, and we're trying to help make sure that that's understood too through our review of the terms of reference. There's been some other high-level questions asked around terms of reference considerations as well, just about even compatibility within an ag area. How does it affect farming technology, GPS? What are some of the other compatibility concerns, maybe at a high level from a construction perspective, and how do those sorts of things get addressed? Those are not unreasonable when we get to a report. To want to take a look at and to make sure that they're capturing and fully considering, you know, how they might go about getting into detailed mitigation when we get there down the road, if we get there down the road. So there's a few moving pieces with this. We don't usually bring terms of references back for council input, not to say that we couldn't if council wanted to see it. Council wants to see it, absolutely, we can do that. We wouldn't typically do that at a terms of reference stage. Some of the advice around process with this that we've provided to the township, though, does contemplate bringing back a report, potentially, before council would consider making a decision on a resolution, if that's where we continue to go. And as part of that report, staff could provide some feedback and some input in that report on our observations of the AIA, what's been addressed, how it's been addressed, and that could even be appended, you know, to that report, so that council has that information as well as the advice coming from your technical staff in terms of what that report is or isn't doing at that point.
So, if I understood, what you said correctly, backing up to the initial, as of yet then, we don't have even the terms of reference for an AIA.
We-
Completed.
Not a completed one. There's been discussion, Emily and Laurel have been working with the proponents on discussing technical merits of the AIA. I believe there's still been some questions around scope that we've been looking for greater clarity on, if that's fair.
Through you, Mayor Mayberry and council, I have received 2 draft terms of reference. They both required revision, and Emily and I provided some detailed assistance and comments regarding that. We have received a revised for one, and the other one will be submitting the revised terms of reference at a later date. So Emily and I will be replying to the revision and letting you know if it has included everything that we've asked them to include in the terms of reference, and then after that terms of reference has been approved by Canada staff, they can then initiate the AIA.
So I guess backing up, because I thought a few minutes ago, April had said that we don't have all the information yet from the province as to what they require. And therefore, I would wonder how you would write a term of reference if we don't have all the information.
So, to you, Mayor, the province has made a bit of a mess with all of this. We have had AIA requirements in the official plan now for a couple of years, and the concept around an AIA actually came out of the provincial growth plan that was for the GTA, and that had been in place for quite some time. The province has then moved that AIA requirement now into the provincial policy statement. That change became final last fall. And then somewhere in the midst of all of that, they pulled it into energy and said, we want parts of this done earlier in this energy process as well. They've not done a great job on actually explaining the mechanics of how that's supposed to work. Staff have expertise in reviewing AIAs. We're familiar with material on that. This is something that we're used to doing, and we've been doing variations of ag impact analysis on development applications for years. We haven't necessarily given a fancy title and put it in its own report always. Sometimes it's an appendice to other, say, planning justification reports that they would see. But we're not new to ag impact. The provincial guidance is to help inform municipalities on the types of requirements and considerations you may want to have. Staff have been providing a lot of input in that because of our own experience in navigating some of these things and working closely with the agricultural community and recognizing that we are an agricultural community by and large. So we're kind of feeding into some of the guidance that's coming out, but it's not intended to be a standard. It's guidance on general approach, things you might want to think through, things you might want to consider in terms of scope. It's not going to be a standard that has a clear checklist that says you have to do exactly these 10 things and you get an approval. So it is guidance for municipalities to consider and do what they will with it, which could also be disregarded in its entirety if they so choose. So it's a bit of an emerging subject area for some area municipalities and for some municipalities more broadly in Ontario. It's not new to planning staff, I'd say that. So we're quite comfortable moving through with sort of the review and the discussions that we've been having because this is not new to us. It is a newer concept perhaps out there in terms of the name and some of the framework around it. The types of mitigation and some of the discussions we're having on scope are more about the approach, and we're trying to make sure that there's clarity so that if we get to that second part down the road, that the scope is able to fully capture the types of things that we might want to see and the details we might want to see coming back on a report in terms of footprints of things and how things could move or how things could be refined. Making sure that considerations around construction timing windows are considered, like trying to really put ourselves into the details. So we're having to look ahead a little bit more and really get into the technical matter on some of this, but we're trying to make sure that the expectations are clear from the outset. Because some of the energy projects, wind especially, look a little bit different. They're not, it's not like a subdivision or something where we're probably talking about more of a fixed shape. They kind of have more of a spider web kind of footprint on the landscape. So it's a little bit harder to think about sort of how to make sure that the scope will fit and consider potentially the full breadth of things that we'd like to make sure are considered. So the scope discussions, I think, are winding down. But we wanted to make sure that there was clarity around some of the expectations.
Other questions from council? Let's, can I assume that we might see, given the angst in the community and the emphasis and importance of agriculture, that we'll see a draft terms of reference when it's finished, or the terms of reference when
If council wants to see the terms of reference documents, like they're available, they've been submitted to the township, there's nothing particularly confidential or hidden, or trying to be hidden here. This goes back to, I think, some of the other things contemplated, even the report about having a process. So when these types of applications or proposals are coming forward, does the township want to see maybe something posted on the website consistently when we've received information and what we've received? When we have a complete application for a planning application, that's something that we do. We would have all of those publicly available reports posted somewhere. So how we set up a process, recognizing that the ISO is indicating that this procurement process is going to be probably ongoing for a number of years with a number of intake windows, which may or may not generate interest in other potential projects down the road. Having some clarity around, what do we do when we get an inquiry? How do we share information? How do we inform council? How do we give a little bit more structure to this, just to create that transparency? And there's parts of that contemplated even through the report and some of the attachments. Those are things that staff can certainly do. And if posting, copies of reports that have been received or the terms of references that have been received as a part of that, those are certainly things that we can do.
so I'm more interested. I'm interested in what the terms of reference actually requires of the proponent to do. From a municipal perspective. I realize you're looking at it from a planning perspective and planning staff, and I appreciate, fully respect that. I'm just thinking, that from a municipal perspective, from a council perspective, not that I might even understand it all, but just that, it would be what is actually being required, requested, and does it satisfy the agricultural intent? This is completely separate from everything else, but it is part.
Yes.
Any others? So the other issue, Julie, for this report, is the concern and the request by a number of people in the community around the unwilling host designation. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure, well, what I was intending through this report is just to help make council aware of when municipal support is required. There is a step in the process where if a proponent gets to the point of submitting an application to make a request to council to provide support, you will have that opportunity to do that. I understand that the intention of declaring the municipality as an unwilling host is intended to send a message that we're not interested in having any renewable energy projects here, or specifically wind projects here. But I just think that it's important for council to consider that there is a step in this process where you will have a say, and the proponent will need your support to continue to move forward with the procurement process. And just that if you go through this process, and you will have an opportunity to see the request in its entirety and consider it based on all of the information that's come forward, both from the community and also from the proponents.
So comments, any comments? So if a council, any council said they were an unwilling host, does that in any way prevent any applicant from bringing in a request for consent?
My understanding is no. You could still have a request come forward. And if they were going through the process and they submitted an application to request municipal support, that could still happen.
It doesn't stop the process. It may appear as a roadblock, or it may be considered a roadblock by the proponent. But it doesn't actually stop the process.
That's my
So
understanding.
what stops the process is if council says no to an application or a request for consent. That's what actually stops the process.
Yes, at the point where that application for municipal support comes forward, the council says no, my understanding is that's where the process comes.
So an applicant isn't going to bring a request for consent until they have all of the information that they want to provide to council. And council is going to have that on one hand, and they're going to have all of the concerns and comments from the public on the other hand, and you're going to end up balancing. I mean, each individual councilor will end up sort of balancing like this, saying, yeah, no, I think this has it or that has it.
That's my understanding.
So I think it's important for both council and the public to understand that there's a process here and that council should in fact, or will be required in fact, to finish the process with or without any kind of declaration one way or another.
Yes.
Anything further from your council? Thanks very much, April, and being here, appreciate that. Nothing else from council on this? Then the recommendation is to receive, I believe, the report as information.
Proof, receive it as information.
Sorry, I'm just having trouble with it. I'll get to it. Do we have a second? Second by Gallagher. Result, council Thompson proposed to report CL 35.15 wind energy proposals, community concerns and township floor and approval processes information. Any further discussion? Councilor Gillis.
Thanks, for the time.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. And, what's Marion? Oh, Marion said we're having a water break. It's 11:30, so we got 5 minutes. Next report is, the, our plan. Shane, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through Mayor to council. This is just a quick brief information report. Council will recall back in 2025 budget, we allocated 40,000 from the DC funds for a master fire plan. We got on to RFP, it closed, we had 2 proponents come back. We have selected Lumex Group or Trent Jervis from the Lumex Group as a successful proponent. There was an evaluation process built within the RFP. And it's within budget, so we're actually excited from a fire service perspective to get this done to help us with our strategic planning and strategic decision making. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Shane. Any questions or comments from council? Councilor Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not critical of this report at all, but I do want to raise a point that over the last 100 years, we've added more staff positions in terms of the size of our administration, both here and in connection with the other rural municipalities, training officers, that sort of thing. And this is another report that brings another $40,000 report forward, right? That's what it's going to cost us to put this plan together. And it just seems like even though we're growing our administration, we're still relying on outside resources more and more with additional costs. And that's a concern going forward in terms of, you know, we're looking at building a whole nother building because we're out of space here and we keep adding more people and yet we still go to outside firms for more advice. And so I'm concerned about that.
Any other comments? Councilor White.
Through the mayor to the fire chief, Lumex Group, where are they out of?
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Councilor Anderson, moving on.
No, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Booker.
Yeah, to the fire chief through you. In your position, do you think you have the experience to do that or the time?
Through the mayor to council, I guess first I'd jump on Councilor White's question. Just to be clear, so although Lumex Group is out of Peterborough, they bring in a ton of resources. So they use a project team on this, which brings in expertise on a number of different facets. So, you know, back to your question, Councilor Bugner. I actually like to go to a third party, one, because it gives me third party credibility when talking to council to say, hey, listen, it's not just the fire chief saying this is what it is. And when I go through a master fire plan process, which I've been through several, and quite frankly, I do third party them, it's an audit of our department as it is. I don't look at a consultant as somebody we've told what to do. I actually bring them in, I say, you do a third party audit of my department and tell me what we should be doing in the future. And then what that does is build that strategic plan for council going forward. And then every year after that, through the budget cycle, they make recommendations to council that says, hey, this is what we should be looking at. And then council through that budget process has the opportunity to say yay or nay, or give a comment on the process. So I'm very much in favor of this process.
Any other questions, Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the fire chief. I've heard of Lumex before. Now, is there any chance that they did the plan for the Tillsonburg Airport?
Through you, Mayor, to Councilor Jerson, I'm not familiar with that. I am not sure. I'm sure they do lots of work. In fact, they actually scored well in our RFP evaluation with their experience. And it's about the experience with similar size municipalities as well. And they also have a large repertoire of information based on comparable municipalities.
Thank you.
Bill.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the fire chief. This is the master fire plan, and then we've also heard of the fire strategic plan. So how does this play into that? This is the suggestions of what should be accomplished, and the strategic plan is how it will be accomplished.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mayor, did you want to say something? No.
The strategic plan's done some time ago, I think in 2014, 15-ish. Yeah, so this document will provide information with the potential to improve or build on the existing strategic plan.
Yeah, just to add context to that through you, Mayor, so really what this will become the strategic plan for, the next 10-year planning horizon for the fire service.
Any other questions? So I don't know anything about either group. Nor do I even understand exactly what they're going to, or what the outcome is gonna be. I'm just wondering, you obviously scored two teams. What was the advantage of Lumax, or what was the disadvantage of the emergency management group? Like what made one stand out in your mind over the other?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, great question. Quite frankly, both of the proponents were, scored well when it came to experience, relevant to experience size. Where the Lumex group they were within budget, quite frankly, so there was a scoring matrix based on what the actual cost was. The one was over budget and the one came within budget.
Okay.
But very comparable.
I guess, I hate to say you get what you pay for, but, I appreciate the, set of budgets we're gonna have to live with, but I guess I just wanna make sure, because this is one of those situations where I feel like, I'm totally, at the mercy of other people on this, because I never been through this experience, as far as, hiring an outside group to come in and do a master plan on fire services, before, and so you kind of say, oh, okay. But I appreciate the work that's gone into it, and if you're satisfied with them, have you ever actually worked with Lumex before?
Not for you, Mr. Mayor, not with Lumex specifically, but I have reviewed their reports and they're pretty fulsome reports.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, we have a motion then. Moved by Gillis, seconded by resolving the report FD 2025-002, titled Master Fire Plan RFP Award be received as information. Now, do we want to receive it as information, or are we going to accept it?
Well, receive this information is adequate because it's in the budget and it's been approved by council.
Okay. Received as information. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. Thanks very much, Shane. We're down to consent agenda. Do we have a motion for a consent agenda? Moved by Boomer, seconded by Gerson. Anything in there that you want to take out? Seeing none, any, no other discussion, all those in favor, noted and filed, okay. Just making a note there, I forgot to write down the June 12th for the Salford. And I think we're then down to accounts payable. Moved by Gillis, seconded by Way. Result of the following accounts be approved payment, accounts payable from May 18th to May 31st, 2025, $181,333. Payroll number 11 general, $58,860.85. Payroll number 5 council, $8,769.83. Payroll number 5 fire, $21,627.83 for a total of $370,594.81. Any discussion? Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Down on the bottom portion of that, county of Oxford debenture payment. How's that process going? So we paid them $76,000. Is that then collected as per the schedule in the engineer's report? Okay.
So this is us paying a debenture though, so this is a debenture.
Right, but we will be billing back, so
Yeah.
we're running through the county. And then we bill the property owners. For on an annual basis for their share of that over the period of time the venture is.
So we paid the full shot of that drain being constructed at the outset,
Yes,
and then we build that back over the debenture period in order to recoup those costs.
Well, we paid through a debenture from the county. So the county actually paid for it.
Yeah.
We're just now returning them their money.
Yeah.
It was in principle. So,
But that all comes back from the individual landowners and with the exception of the roads portion.
right.
and Once a year, we pay the bench twice a year.
When they're on taxes, right, twice a year, is it? There's just the final taxes, okay, so drain to that tree.
Oh, okay, drain the bench, are normal benches, okay. Okay, any further discussion? I think we already voted for the budget, or for the, did we?
No.
No. All right, all those in favor of the financial, opposed, that's carried. Bylaws, we have a motion for the bylaws. Moved by Whitner, second by Gemma, and the reading is.
Resolved that the following bylaws be introduced and that be read a first and second time. Bylaw number 43, 2025, being a bylaw to provide for drainage works in the township of South Oxford for the Flow Drain. Bylaw number 44, 2025, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement to occupy residence. Bylaw number 45, 2025, being a bylaw to amend the township of South Oxford zoning bylaw in relation to accessory structures and minimum gross floor areas of residential dwellings.
Any discussion? None, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. And third final reading moved by Gillis, second by Way. Reading is.
Well, that bylaws 43, 2025 to 45, 2025, inclusive be read a third time and finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the bylaws and affix the public seal.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. And any notice of motion? New business, Councillor Gillis, you had. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So the question was brought up to me about zoning and either clean yards or property maintenance. I think that for a regular residential lot, I think everything can be taken care of. But the concern is that bylaw has been asked to go to a certain property a few times. And it doesn't seem to be changing. But the reasoning that they're getting back is zoning allows for some of the stuff that's going on there. But the problem is, property is technically being rented to another person. And it's their personal stuff, it's not a business, so it's not technically commercial space, even though it's zoned commercial. So that's kind of leading to some, we'll say, what do you call that, angst, of some community members, and now it's becoming an eyesore. So I'm just wondering, like, unfortunately, the zoning is allowing it to continue because it allows for extra cars and vehicles and everything parked there. But if any sees a person who's renting it, they're just personal junk, sitting there and nothing seems to be happening.
We do have to be a bit careful talking about specifics in open session. I think I know what you're talking about. We did do a cleanup there last year, but I understand it's gone back to some of its previous state. So I know enforcement staff will be following up. If we have to do another cleanup, then we will. That's really our only option. We can, under the bylaw, if they do not clean up the property, we can go in and do it ourselves and then send an invoice to the property owner, which we have done on a few properties over the last year. Zoning related violations are very difficult because the only way we can enforce it is by taking it to court. And there's significant costs with that, so we are trying to deal with them under clean yards and property standards as much as we can. And that's the only way we can do it. We issue an order, they don't comply, then we arrange to have the property cleaned up, we send it to them.
It just seems kind of challenging, when it's residential, it seems pretty straightforward, but when you get in the gray area of industrial or commercial. And you know, whether it's the owner or a renter, or how that's gonna work. I think the complaint has been, is it changes a little bit and then it just goes back where it was. And the other concern is there has been more rodents in the area, so it's like, okay, well, are we making it better, are we making it worse by not being able to do anything? So I don't put that concern out there, whether that zoning is kind of limiting what we can and can't.
There are provisions within the zoning bylaw as well in relation to storage in the front yard, so we have tried to enforce that way as well. But as I mentioned, typically it comes down to, there isn't a cleanup, we have to schedule it and do it, hire somebody to come in and do it.
Councillor.
Yeah, I know we have the same problem in Brownsville, especially right on the main four corners. It's owned by a company from Toronto. And they don't maintain the grasses about this high and there's still junk in the yard and. I've had a couple of complaints, and you had one filed just last week or the week before.
We actually did a cleanup on one of them. They ended up contracting the company that we contracted it, but I know the one you're talking about, we had to import it.
Okay, anything else in the new business? And let's move on to closed session, and motion to go into closed session. Oh, we want the council round table.
Just going back forward.
Okay. Sure, I can follow the rules. Ward one. That's good there.
Oh, yeah, it's just a village yard sale Saturday is coming up. And on the 12th of June, I have a catfish meeting, and then on the 9th, the 14th, they're actually having a 75th anniversary celebrating with the forming of the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority. So I think it's pretty much an open house, but I haven't had a meeting lately to find all final details.
Ward two.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Number of things going on. Long Point Region meets tomorrow evening. Yet another, have a development application hearing to deal with, and seems to be an increasing number of those all the time. Yesterday, I attended my first meeting of the Bacchus Museum Committee, and serving there as part of my duties at the LPRCA. There's also I was just looking for the email that I had here, but I believe it's on June 17th. Is the opening of the education center at Bacchus Milton. And so you're all invited to that if you have the time to make it out for that. Durham Center Hall Board, I believe it's also June 17th is the community barbecue before a council meeting that night. I won't be in attendance at the barbecue, but hopefully some of you folks will make it and grab supper before you head over here. Or actually to the community center on time. Great. Mountain Hall Board met on last Monday evening, just ongoing maintenance and fundraising items to deal with there. Back in the end of April, I attended a 2-day virtual seminar, and that was actually put on by the New Mix Group. And that was around crisis communications. Tomorrow I'm scheduled to attend another virtual seminar, and that one is on strategic management. And so looking forward to that. They just released a slide deck for the August or for the April presentation last week, so I'm hoping to have a report ready for that sometime fairly soon, and then also on tomorrow's workshop as well. And then on personal note, Sunday I got to go visit my new granddaughter for the first time, and so yeah, we're very thankful to God for safe arrival of Nyla Michelle. And so yeah, that's good fun.
Yeah, congratulations, although that's very little to do with grandchildren, anyways. They're served for arrival or anything else, so, I'm sure you'll enjoy this grandchild as much as the others. Ward three.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start off with what we already know, and what we know is that there's going to be a Selford landfill community meeting Thursday, June the 12th at 6:30 p.m. And the Selford Community Hall has agreed that they will host. That means refreshments. I'll be chairing. I think it'll be a good meeting. I hope somebody will be there to take this. Anyways, the Selford Hall Board meeting is tonight at 7:30. Always a good meeting. The Engage and Inform meeting is tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and the community fair, which was held at, I considered it a great success. It was so delightful to be there. I really enjoyed it. And I'd like to say thank you very much, Nicole, for all your hard work. Sincerely, the event was so well planned. Thank you. And Julie, thank you. Well planned, ladies. I've had no word from the airport as to when their next meeting will be. It's probably going to be in about another month. Hilltop Bottle Drive occurred the same day as the community fair. I've not heard from them, so I would like to think that that bottle drive was a success as well. So with that, I'll just pass it on to the next person.
Ward four.
Beach Museum Board meeting next Wednesday night. Fun Day in Full is on the 21st. I think I've mentioned it to you before, David, they would like me there at 12:30. I think I asked you for their official ribbon cutting. That's gonna take place at 12:30. And Nicole, I asked you about the sound system. So Mitch Kirby will be picking it up on the Friday, the day before, okay? Thank you. And that's about it.
Good, Counselor, Pickard, how are things in Sweetburg and Ward 5?
Well, I think we're making some progress here. Some days it's hard to tell. I want to thank everybody for all the good wishes and goodwill thoughts that were sent. The only thing that we're working on right now is the fish fry is Saturday. There's still tickets available. You have to phone for them. And the trail in the Peace Park is now complete. So if you get a chance, you might want to go and have a look. That's my report.
Okay, Ward 6.
Ward 6, thank you. A couple of weeks ago was the community yard sales. It was very busy in Beachville that weekend. A lot of people walking through the village. And then subsequently, the following Sunday was the first car show at the museum. Very popular turnout. The skies cleared that day, and it was a great first one of the year. I think everybody was pretty happy with how it was put on. And I know that the staff and volunteers that help out with the car show all have what is it, unified shirts on, so you can clearly tell who they are now. So it's I think as we've moved along, it's become better all the time. So that was great. This past weekend, Beach Shore Firefighter Association had a breakfast, fire hall. Sorry for the rest of you that didn't make it there, but like it was great. There was over 300 adults. I think there were about 70 children and smaller children as well. There was some messages about fire safety and whatnot, and the weather was great for that as well. And it was great to see Mrs. Pickard take home a special meal for Jim. So we packed a good one for him, so hopefully he got that. He's smiling today, so obviously it sat well with him, so that's always good. And that's my report.
Good, thanks very much. Counselor Yepra.
Just a question to Council Bruckner on the car shows. Is that a revenue generator for the museum, or is that just getting foot traffic?
It's not necessarily a revenue generator, but there's things they do at the car show to generate revenue. They're doing 50/50 draws, they're doing barbecues, they're doing raffles and whatnot. So there are things there. I think that the fact that we attract people by not really charging admission for the cars is what brings people to the museum.
So is there any admission charge for the event at all, either to the spectators or to the exhibitors?
No.
Okay, the reason I ask is because the Bacchus Museum is facing some financial constraints, and so I encourage them to reach out to the Beachville Museum and see what they had done in terms of generating more foot traffic, et cetera.
I think that we have found, George can back me on this, that it's easier to get people there. Obviously, you don't put a admission fee on it or restrict people from coming or when they could come and where they come. And then it's like, well, okay, now I'm here and here for free. Well, all right, now I got a couple of bucks. I can go buy some food, or what's $5 for a raffle? It's not a big deal. But if you're charging $10 a car, $20 a car to come in, then well, it's like, well, now they want another 10 for this and another 15 for that. So I think there's give and take there.
Yeah.
I think different organizations do it differently, but then it brings back people for awareness. Like we advertise for breakfast, we advertise other things going on in the community. The programs at the museum, surprising intake of people at the museum, a couple of vendors that happen to be there. So it's not just a event just for a moneymaker for the museum, but it does bring awareness to other organizations that are tied into it.
Great, thanks.
I'll just add to that. We have 5 car shows a year.
Yeah.
Last year we had 4 because one was rained out.
Okay,
And 4 car shows brought an income of almost $3,600 to the museum.
okay.
And most of that is through the 50/50 draw, and people just donate. We have a donation barrel and willy-nilly on how much you want to donate if you take a car. So I know guys that never put money in when we go to these kind of car shows. They just will never do it, so I think we do have a pretty good income from what's going on, so.
And the chair of that committee has been very good at going out, getting donations and raffles and prizes for people we've had donated from different clubs and organizations around the community. And we've been very lucky to be able to do that, and I think that the draw says that it's working well.
No, just having attended my first meeting of the Bacchus Museum yesterday and understanding a little bit of the, financial challenges that they're facing. And again, I encourage them to reach out to Beachville, with the exception of poaching our curator. We don't want that to happen.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't have anything really other than most of my county report. I was gonna comment on a couple of things. One, I thought the car show was well done, and for the first one, kind of early in the year, I thought it was an excellent turnout. A couple of people mentioned that, they like the later ones because it's warmer and all that. But there must have been at least 100 cars there.
Yeah.
20 cars, so
About 121, I think, was final tally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so good on them. The only criticism I'd have is the Legion hamburger, french fries and the pop or water or whatever is only $9. Really, guys, make it $10.
You know.
But
You can leave
having-
with your extra dollar.
I did, but I would also say though, it's one of those things that was great for them too, right? Like it's a pretty easy moneymaker for them and good for them. And it's about how do you bring people in from a variety of interests and all that in the township and get them together. And so the ice cream breakable and all that sort of stuff, that's great. I fully appreciate it. So thanks very much. Having said that, I move into closed session. We have a motion to go into close. Moved by Whitmer, second